Today I want to show you one of our massive projects slated for completion sometime next year, possibly in July. And this project right here is in Kakamega County, which is in Western Kenya, not too far from Karating, which is where we usually film. We will be here to do a big reveal sometime, I believe, in August when all the finishes are done. For now, I'm here to do a deep review of electrical works, plumbing, layout and points, and just to get a general sense of some of the workmanship that has been going on for the last couple of months. But before I do that, good morning, family. I hope you all are ready to close up the year with a bang. It has been one of the most interesting years of my life, at least in the last decade. And I believe it has been so for many of my fans who have met me this year through this platform that we are all sharing. In fact, our channel has grown in the last maybe 4 or 5 months. Our channel has grown from 300 subbies to about 12,000 plus, with over 1 million views. In the last couple of weeks, I've really had the honor to meet so many people from all over the world, places I would have never imagined I would ever get in touch with in terms of meeting people from these different places. I've met people from Rift Valley, Western, Migori, Kisumu, and this is just within Kenya. A lot of the viewers that I've also interacted with, both in person and virtually, live in different parts of the world, whether you're talking Australia, Colombia, Poland, Canada, all these other places. And I am so grateful for this opportunity. And so if nothing else, if this channel never makes it in the future, I will always be grateful for the time that we've all shared, connecting with each other, sharing information and just chatting. And it's been one of the most influential life events I've experienced in the last couple of years. So I'm really grateful for all of that. In fact, as I say that, I'm particularly reminded of some 2 sisters from Sweden that I recently ran into at a mall in Kisumu, who have since disappeared. So wherever you two are, just know that you are required to report to headquarters. I met them, we chatted, we were supposed to catch up, and somehow they've disappeared. So they need to find me as soon as possible. But in all, again, as I said, I remain very grateful for the opportunity to get to meet you. I'm very grateful for the time you spend with us. If you're a subscriber, I'm thankful. But even if you're simply a viewer, your time is absolutely appreciated. So thank you for doing what you've done. Many folks have actually subscribed, watched, shared our work, engaged with us through chats, calls, and even in-person meetings. And all of that is nothing that I take for granted, because people take their time, people put in their passion because they care about the work that we do. And I'm eternally grateful for all that. So I thank you. I thank you for doing all that work, staying with us. Many folks left, but a lot more have actually come on board. So if you're still sticking around with us months later, thank you for doing that. Now, as I said, in the last couple of months, even with our consulting work, which I had no plan for, it's something that came upon me through this work. We came from 0 clients, and in just about a span of a month, we already have 20 plus clients. And all of these clients have different projects going on. Many of them have renovations that they need to be done. Others are already in progress. Some of them have repair works. Currently, I have quite a few roof issues that my folks are working on. I've got a lot more folks who are looking for land. In fact, the most surprising part for me is that there's been quite a few non-Kenyans, people who've never been to Kenya, and are interested in finding land in Karating or in Kisumu. And that really warms my heart. And if you're Kenyan, you know, we really love people who are not Kenyan, who are just excited about being a part of Kenya. And so, yes, I've been really positively surprised that there are people who, after watching the work we do on the ground, are just curious to come see what we do here. And some of them actually want to buy land in Kenya, and particularly in Kisumu. So you're all welcome if you're interested. Then there's quite a few folks who have complete construction project. In fact, we've broken ground in a few places that are already going on. Some people are planning to do rental properties that we're working on. Others have simply reached out for advice on issues returnee. Some are just asking me to do site visits and check things. All that work is going on, and we are very thankful. So again, thank you for doing what you do. Now, for those of you who are still interested in engaging with us, our number is already posted on our channel. Please feel free to text on WhatsApp. We will definitely get back to you within 12 hours, and in many cases sooner than that. So since this is our final video of the year, I want to focus this episode on my recent site visit, focusing specifically on electrical works and plumbing. And I'll be telling you some of the things that I look for when I come in to see what folks have done, especially at the piping stage, because this is often one of the best stages to make a lot of changes. Because personally, I hate it when we have to hack walls that have been plastered to fix things back and forth. I've got friends right now who have lived in homes for probably 10 plus years, and they have to hack walls to move wires, move points and things like that. And it's not a fun process. It's costly, it's ugly, and in many cases when it's all done, sometimes if you don't get good folks, the walls don't go back the way they are. And so personally, I prefer to do a thorough review of electrical lines and plumbing works at this stage right before the plaster begins. And if you're there, please do a thorough review before plaster, because again, you don't want to do all the hacking and changing things later on. It costs you more, and sometimes your wall will not look the same. So that's what I'm going to do today, and I'm going to show you what I look for when I do this, so that even if you're not using me, you can go do it on your own. Again, as I've said in the past, my most critical role so far has been to bridge that gap between diasporans and people who live at home or work at home. So this happens because I sort of live in both worlds. I spent a few months in Kenya, specifically in Karating, but also spent a few months in Long Beach in California. I've lived in diaspora for nearly 2 decades. And so I have some understanding of what people appreciate in diaspora. But also the few months that I've spent in Kenya has given me a new sense of understanding of how some things function. I still have a lot of learning to do, but I sort of straddle between these two worlds. And so I believe as of now, one of the most important contributions I can give to folks is to bridge those two worlds, where I take what's in a diasporan's mind and I make sure that folks on the ground are able to translate it as it is in their minds. So this task definitely applies to every single step of the process, starting with just the initial stages of initiation, where you're just thinking of ideas, all the way up to finishes. And of course, electrical works and plumbing are some of the most critical elements that requires that translation, because a lot of things go wrong with electricals and plumbing, in part because the village fundis or the fundis we use in Kenya sometimes have a hard time translating what's on our minds to the ground. And then the reverse is also true. A lot of returnees or diasporans that I talk to have a hard time communicating with fundis in ways that make it possible for the fundis to do exactly what they want. So things often get lost in translation. And so in the last couple of months, that's been one of the things I've put in a lot of work in, where I come in after listening to a diasporan, I get to the ground, talk to the folks on the ground, and they do a follow-up to make sure that whatever the diasporan wants is exactly what is executed. The majority of folks I talk to always complain of asking one thing and finding a separate, completely different thing delivered. So that's really one of the main things that I'm doing currently with folks on the ground. So anyway, when it comes to electrical works, whenever I do reviews at this stage, here are the things I focus on. So let's start with the outside, which you must have seen me do. I usually do a walk around on the outside, do some checks, then we get to the inside. So for the outside part, here are the 7 things that I usually focus on. Number 1, I look at blind spots. You'd be surprised how many blind spots there are when they're putting in just the piping, because oftentimes people don't think about how wide those light fixtures are meant to shine. So we walk through where there are blind spots. I ask the electrical folks to increase or to add more outlets. The second thing I look for is whether there are provisions for outlets on the outside. So I look at, are they there? Are they enough? And what are the spacings between those? In the majority of cases, our electricians do not put outlets outside. And if you're a diasporan, you know this is really critical. And again, some of the things I look at here are things that diasporans value. Folks who live in Kenya may not really value them as much, but these are things that are really critical for diasporans. For example, some of us have electric cars that need to be charged. And so if you don't have a charging port within the garage, or if you don't have a garage, there needs to be some place outside that you can charge your car. And if you don't have an electric car now, that may be a possibility in the future. So I check for that. But then there are many other devices that we charge outside, whether it's just a simple phone, whether it's a boombox or it's something else. So there has to be enough outlets on the outside, especially on the verandas, gazebos, and things like that. So I review all of that. Then I also check whether there are proper provisions for CCTV. Again, this is mostly about the blind spots. Most people set it up, but then there's always blind spots if these people are not careful. The fourth thing that I also look for is I assess whether I assess the lighting points in relation to each other. Sometimes I find quite a bit of redundancy where there's one light fixture next to another, and I'm not sure why you need those two light fixtures that are exactly the same. I look for efficiencies. How can we maximize the resources we have in terms of light fixtures outside? Again, I look at spacing, I look at utility, whether what you have outside is really functional. In fact, I've had cases where one of my clients had solar light installed in a place that receives very little light because there's a tree and it's behind in a place where the sun sets. So in that case, what would typically happen is that that particular solar light would get very little sunlight. So it'll come on probably up till like maybe 10 or 11 and then goes off. So the client would wonder later on, why is it that other solar lights are on, but then you have these 2 or 3 lights that are only on for like 2-3 hours when it's the same solar light. So I look for functionality and utility wherever they are. The other thing that I look at, which is number 5, is the type of outlets that are set up for the outside. Are they ideal for the places they've been set up? So if there needs to be a change, we adjust that. And then, of course, I look for provisions for a minimum of 3 power sources. Because again, most of us live in the village. And when you live in the village, things happen. And surprisingly enough, these are also issues that are critical for folks who live in diaspora. Because, for example, if you live in a place like Florida, there's always hurricanes and then people lose power and all that stuff. So you need options for power sources. So the first obviously is the KPLC outlet, then you have the solar power, and you have power from generators. So I want to make sure that outside there are provisions for all those 3 options should a client choose at some point to use 3. You don't have to use all 3, but there needs to be provisions for all 3. So just in case you need to use any one of those, the systems are already set up. And then the last thing I look at when it comes to power outside has to do with KPLC. So I check what's the ideal pathway from the nearest pole to your home. In fact, in some cases, I even recommend that clients build like a small mabati house that will receive the main line from the nearest pole. So that way it saves you from buying an extra pole. And so once you have the small mabati house where they drop the line, then the power to the main house can be done underground. So there are things to work around KPLC to minimize cost, and all that takes planning. So I walk around to check what's there, and if there are adjustments that are needed, we do that. Now, when it comes to the inside part, I look at whether, number 1, do we have sufficient number of outlets per room? In the majority of cases, you have far fewer outlets than needed. And so I almost always ask electricians to increase the number of outlets per room. The second thing that I look at is I look at the location for the switches in relation to doors and other fixtures. For example, unfortunately, sometimes you'll find light switches that are slated to be behind doors. Clearly, as you can tell, that's really not functional. Or sometimes you have light switches that are so high next to the bed that anybody sitting on the bed cannot actually switch off the light because they're that high. So often that means a person has to stand on the bed to switch off the light if they have the light switches next to the bed. So I look at things like that, which of course has to do with the height of the switches. Is this really functional? What if a person is in a wheelchair? Can they actually turn on and turn off the lights? And then, of course, like the one I did outside, I also look at functionality. I've seen cases where I walk in and I find, for example, an outlet inside a closet. Now, maybe somebody out there may know what that does, but I don't understand why you need to have an outlet hidden behind a closet that is meant to have wooden fixtures in there. But maybe there's work for it. So I look at functionality. Sometimes you have outlets that really play very little role, or outlets that overlap in such a way that they'll eventually have to be removed. So that's where redundancy comes in. So if there's redundancy in some areas, I often recommend ask the electricians to remove some of those extra things, unless the owner really wants that particular outlet to be wherever it is. And then I ask the electrician to think about future appliances. Do we have provisions for future appliances like AC units? Because at some point, there are clients who may choose to use wall-mounted AC units. So do we have sockets where the wall-mounted AC units can be plugged in? If there's none of that, I ask the electricians to put outlets on top of every bed area in every bedroom and in every living room area. I also ask them, what if a person wants to use a projector? Do they have an outlet somewhere? So I ask them to put in that. So these are things we just put in place so that in case a client needs them in future, the provision is there. But if they don't need them, those provisions really don't cost too much. And then we also look at the outlets in relation to fire suppression systems or fire alert systems. Then we move into the bathrooms, which, as you've seen me walk through some of these. And with bathrooms, when it comes to electricals, I'm most concerned about whether there are provisions for electrified mirrors. Sometimes if there's no electrical line running across that area, then the client is forced to use a very specific type of mirror. So if they wanted to use a mirror that uses the electricity, they can't do it if there was no electric line behind it. So I check that too. And I also look at whether there's a provision for an outlet right next to vanities. So for me, and I know for many diasporans, there has to be power outlets in every place there is vanity, particularly in bathrooms. And you're thinking about places where you can charge your toothbrushes, or where folks can use whatever women use to blow their hair. So those are things that diasporans care about, and I check at that. And as you see me using a tape and all that, I look at height. How high are these fixtures? How high are these outlets? In relation to future fixtures like vanities and other furniture that are going to fit in a room. And then lastly, I do plumbing layout assessment, where the first thing I look at is safety. Is the bathroom laid out in such a way that it minimizes risk to the people using it? Like in this particular case where I'm standing, you want to make sure that you start with the vanity, and then you have the toilet in the middle, and then you have the shower area furthest. So that way there's no situation where the water spills back to the toilet and the entrance, because that can be a big safety issues in terms of falls. So I check that. I look at accessibility. How wide are the doors? When the doors open, is there a possibility that the door would be hitting the vanity? And what would that mean for a wheelchair user? And in terms of utility, are the fixtures, plumbing fixtures put in there really functional? Where are the draining holes? So we assess the general utility of everything else that is in there. We also look at aesthetics. Does the bathroom really look organized? Sometimes you have a huge bathroom with things just scattered all over the place. And then you wonder, you have so much space that so much could be done, but then there's just so much chaos. So aesthetics also matter. And then lastly, we look at functionality. Is everything in there functional, or do we need to take out certain things? I've walked in some homes where there's actually almost something that looks like a toilet area right by the door, which really makes no sense. So there's some mistakes that folks make that we correct at this point. Now, after reviewing this specific project, I would say that about 90% of it is really right. And these guys did a good job, and I'm happy with that. However, there are some alterations that will need to be done both outside and inside. So I'm going to meet with my client, review my findings, but the fundis already know what needs to be done. We just need to do a follow-up to make sure that what we talked about is actually executed as described. Now, overall, I hope that this year has been full of learning for you as it has been for me. I have learned so much, so much from so many people. It's just unbelievable. And I hope you've learned as well. So next year, I hope we will do more, way more than we have this year. I wish you all a happy new year. Celebrate in safety. Please don't overdo it, but have some fun. So let's meet in the new year with renewed energy, with boundless blessings and more love. I cannot wait to see you next year enjoying the best version of your life in Africa. Happy New Year, family, and I'll see you in about a day or so. Good night.